What are the steps to get into this space? What are the key technologies that someone needs to learn to sort of upskill themselves to get into cloud or to work in this space?
So that is kind of the roadmap, but I do have a resource if you want. It's called Learn to Cloud. All of this is kind of covered there, along with the projects that you should build.
This is Rishab, a Microsoft MVP, AWS community builder, staff developer evangelist, and also a DevOps engineer with his open source cloud guide, Learn to Cloud. It's such a pleasure having Rishab on the podcast today, and in this video, you will receive an amazing guide that can help you learn cloud and hopefully break into the industry. You'll also hear a lot about Rishab's incredible story. But before we get into the episode, please remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let's get into it.
So I currently work as a developer evangelist for Twilio, which is cloud communications platform. Most of the people know it as a cloud communications platform, but we have other products as well. But yeah, that's what I currently do, and it's been around, I want to say, almost 3 years. So 2 years and 11 months. But yeah, almost 3 years, I guess now. And before that, I've had kind of a journey. So I've worked as a DevOps engineer. I have worked as a cloud operations engineer, and then also I started my career as a technical support specialist.
So we know you for your content online, speaking about cloud and DevOps, and it's interesting to hear the journey that it took to, going through several different roles to getting to that point. Really interesting to hear that you actually started in tech support and worked your way up.
Yeah, I think it's the tech support role is very close to my heart, is because it was kind of a gateway for me into tech, and I think a lot of people miss out on that role because they either feel it's not the greatest role if you want to enter into tech. I think we have romanticized with content, as I create content myself too. Specifically, I think with short form, and this is my opinion. So if someone doesn't agree with my opinion, I'm more than happy to, yeah, this is just my personal opinion. There's no need to be offended or something, but I feel like with the short form content that at least I observed is we are romanticizing that. First of all, it's very easy to get like a really good role in tech, in big tech specifically, like SWE or even cloud engineers or some kind of engineering role in tech. Secondly, it's very less stress to work in tech, which is also not true. And third, you get paid a lot in tech, which is kind of true, but it all comes down to your knowledge, your skill, and your experience. These three factors, I think, has led up to people kind of thinking like, oh, I'm not, tech support role is not for me. Like I should look past it. But I think it is the perfect role if you want to get started in tech. You have very less knowledge, like IT fundamentals and stuff, but you don't know specifically how programming languages work and how the cloud works. I think it's a perfect role to start it. And yeah, that's how I started back in 2018. I did do a 2-month co-op, or it's part of the diploma that I was doing, that you were asked to do this internship. So it was not paid, but it basically, I'm glad it was part of the program because it basically made you prepared for real life job. So those 2 months I spent as an IT, like a junior IT admin under the person who was running the IT department. And in those 2 months, I learned a lot, which led me to becoming a tech support at the same company. So that is kind of the context on how I got into it.
Wow.
And yeah, I loved my time as tech support person, even though there were challenges. Of course, you are dealing with customers, and it can be a bit stressful. But the amount of things I learned um, is, yeah, no other role could, I guess, kind of
Yeah.
prepare me well for the journey that was ahead.
Yeah. Really interesting. That you say that that was just a great foundation for your career. And just on the topic of your career, I'd love for you to, give us sort of a brief walkthrough of how you got to the point you are today. You've already given us a little bit of it, but it would be good to understand the journey. We see like lots of your content, we see how technical you are, but some people don't know the story behind, the start and where you are right now. So briefly walk us through and help us get to know that a bit more.
Sure. Yeah. So as I covered few bits of it, so I was doing a computer networking and tech support diploma, which was 2 years back then, and they basically the program taught you about or sorry, computer fundamentals, so operating system networks, how networks work. Um, with operating systems, it was not just Windows; it was also Linux. So I'm glad that was part of the program, and also things like database management and what else? Let me think. Um, yeah, that's pretty much it. And then there were a few, courses on communication stuff because it had the word tech support in it. So the understanding was you were gonna work with either the other people. So you need to be better at communication.
Yeah.
So that took 2 years. Again, the internship was part of it. So I spent 2 months. I really loved, working as a junior IT admin. I would patch servers. There were times when I would troubleshoot, network issues. And also, I did this really cool project that was really close to me of building, monitoring dashboards, and then using Raspberry Pi to like have those dashboards around the office. So there were like four TVs that they said let's utilize them better, and they had spare Raspberry Pis lying around. That was the first time also um, realized what a Raspberry Pi is.
Mm.
So yeah, a lot of cool projects within 2 months that I got to work on. And during my 2 year program, I was working like part time at a gas station, and during summers, I would deliver pizzas as a second job.
Wow.
Um, but that 2 month internship made me realize that tech is what I want to do, because I could go full time into the gas station, and the plan was to make me as a assistant manager for the gas station, the store that I worked at, and that would eventually have led me to do all the immigration stuff, um, and be in Canada legally, I guess.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, it was a risk to go with the tech support role. So towards the end of my internship, I got the opportunity to stay there for a tech support role, which was different to the IT admin role that I was in, or the internship that I did. The tech support role was external facing, so you would talk to the clients. This was a SaaS company, so they had um, managed printer software that people could manage printers with. So think about big universities where there are hundreds, thousands of printers,
Yeah.
or hospitals or government, buildings, even offices. So I would help, or I would give support to the customers of the SaaS product. and the SaaS product was hosted on AWS, which is how I kind of, when I was resolving some issues, if I needed to escalate it to the cloud team, I, you know, would be introduced to AWS. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, tell me more about it so that I can solve this issue on my own next time. And, slowly I got access. I could run different select and update queries on the SQL database we had in AWS. And that got me thinking. And within like 6 months, I moved a few tiers within the support role. So we had 3 tiers. So tier one, tier two, tier three.
Yeah.
And I was already good for like being a tier three after 6 months. And that's when I realized like support is not gonna be for me for the longevity,
Yeah.
and I want to do something else. And being really curious and intrigued by cloud, I'm like, okay, let's learn more about this. I'm glad that we can talk about a bit more in detail how I transitioned, but that led me to being a cloud ops engineer.
Amazing.
So I did the tech support role for a year, then spent 2 years as the cloud operations engineer, and then naturally transitioned into a DevOps role, and then spent a year in that until I started doing developer relations at Twilio.
So, what was it about cloud and AWS
Mm.
that made you say, this is the area that I want to get into, this is what I want to do long term?
I It was one, or I think it was like two key moments. One of them was me just personally being mind blown, because I've learned about computer networking and how you have your own data centers and stuff at this point. So this is back in 2017, 18, right? um I didn't know how extensive the cloud offerings were. So I
Mm.
do know about, like, okay, there was Gmail, there was Google Drive, there's iCloud, right? And that was the extent of it.
Yeah.
I didn't know you could rent computers back then, and you could have your workloads running in cloud instead of you owning a data center or owning a server. And that thing just like blew my mind, because I'm like, oh, it is so easy for a small company to be, scalable. you know IT resources are not a hindrance anymore. You
Mm.
could, if you have an idea today, you could get to building right then and there and scale as you grow your customer base, which is amazing.
Mm.
I think the power it gives you is, as a builder, is just amazing. And then the second one was, um the cloud team, when I was in support, they decided to take me to a conference in Toronto, and I saw 3,000 people at a cloud conference, you know, passionately talking about cloud.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay, this is serious. This can be the career that I want to be in, um, or see myself in. And I think I did my due diligence. I shadowed the software engineering team for a week. I shadowed the cloud engineering team for a week, and then I also shadowed QA engineers when I was in tech support. After that 6 month mark, as I was mentioning, I told this company that, hey, I want to transition from tech support, but I really don't know what I want to do right now, and was kind of confused. So they were more than happy. They're like, okay, yeah, you can shadow these teams and kind of see, where you want to fit in, and then kind of upskill. And spending those 3 weeks, 1 week each with each team, it made me realize like cloud made the most sense with my current skill sets and how it can be transferred. Yeah, that was it. And then I remember like sitting down with the cloud team manager. She helped me with like building a roadmap, things that I needed to upskill on.
Mm.
um she signed me up for like courses and stuff, and also like she had books lying around. She's like, hey, you know happy to lend them over, just go through this stuff, and let us know when you kind of feel ready. And yeah, that was, I think, kind of the context of how I decided to you know do cloud. Your question about AWS is because the company was using AWS, like the decision was kind of very
Yeah.
um yeah, it was. I didn't give it a much thought than just that the company is huge on AWS.
Mm. Amazing, amazing. And we have some big news. It's been a long time coming, but the tech certified community is finally live on Discord. This is a space where tech professionals and aspiring tech professionals have come together. Imagine a space where you can ask questions, share ideas, and learn something new every day from different people. The community is growing fast. There's so much collaborative learning going on. We're having weekly video calls. And the best part about this community is that it is completely free. So what are you waiting for? The link is in the description of this video. Go and join the tech certified community. Let's get right back to the podcast. Now that we've spoken a little bit about that and cloud and, even the learning roadmap that you took to get into that space, I want to talk a little bit about that for other people that watch this channel and really want to get into cloud and they want to, get their first cloud role. Maybe they're in a different role. Maybe they're in tech support and they want to move into cloud. Maybe they're not in tech and they want to move into cloud. Whatever the case is, what are the steps to get into this space? What are the key technologies that someone needs to learn to sort of upskill themselves to get into cloud or to work in this space, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think the fundamentals are really important,
Mm,
and you need to understand how computers and servers work to a basic level. That okay, because cloud is gonna be is once you like start learning about cloud, you'll realize it's just a bunch of servers networked
mm,
together. And then there's a lot of stuff that these companies like AWS, Azure, and GCP have abstracted, that you don't have to do. But going back to the time where you had to buy your own servers, you had to network it together, make sure they talk to each other fine, the security is configured perfectly, you're utilizing the resources perfectly. It's still the same, but the way you configure it has now changed. There's a
mm,
console. You don't have to actually wire in the servers to a switch. Nevertheless, I think it's still important to understand how networking works.
yeah.
So that would be kind of the first step, is learn how networking works. If you're very new to tech, you'll probably have to also understand some IT fundamentals. And so start from the fundamentals, IT, networking, and then also pick like a programming language of your choice. Usually, if you start with like PowerShell or Bash, I think Bash has more. Um, I'm more biased towards Bash, as I, am biased towards Linux being the very good operating system for the cloud. And that's what you'll find in the market as well. Is most of the servers that are used by the companies are going to be Linux,
Mm,
unless it's very necessary to use like a Windows server. Um, so yeah, a scripting language like Bash, but there is a market for PowerShell as well. And then you can kind of transfer that knowledge to a programming language like Python, which is pretty easy to understand and grasp, at least the basics of it.
basics, yeah.
Once you're done with that, oh, since I mentioned Linux, learn about how the operating system works. So Linux is going to be very different to how Windows work. So learn about the CLI, how you can use different commands to make you um, or make the machine do things. How to navigate around a Linux operating system. So this kind of will be the fundamentals phase. The next thing would be to pick your cloud provider of the choice. So, you know, Azure, AWS, even GCP in certain markets. Like do your own research. If you already have a preference, go with it. But a practical way would be to kind of see which cloud is more popular in your job market and go from there. So if it's AWS, start learning about AWS. Start with you can pick you can either pick a certification, or you can start on your own with a fundamentals course on AWS or Azure. There are a lot of free resources out there. So before you know buying into like a course or a book, start with the free resource, understand the terminology, and then kind of see, okay, um for AWS you could go the AWS cloud practitioner route. Don't give the certification if you are in a place where there could be financial constraints. You can just use that learning path to upskill and not give the certification, because you can later, after you are done with the cloud practitioner learning path, you can go to the solutions architect um, certification. That one I think is pretty solid certificate to have,
Hmm.
just to show you that, sorry, just so that you can show your future employers that, okay, this is, I'm you know well versed with the knowledge, um because I have this to showcase. But just don't rely on certifications. Have like Go into the console, get your hands dirty. I'm a huge advocate of having projects and having solid projects. Don't copy like someone else's project idea, and like actually sit down and do the work. So figure out how would you host your own project in cloud, what different services you'll use. Familiarize yourself with well architected framework,
Hmm.
because when you're working for a company, it's going to be a production system, and they want to use and utilize the best services to the maximum for their production workloads, which is going to look a lot different to like a basic project that you might host. So learn about those practices, and you can take the same kind of map and do it with like other cloud providers. So Azure would be AZ900 and then AZ104. Um, and after that, learn a bit about how you can automate stuff. So things like ISE, so
Hmm.
infrastructure as code. It can be cloud formation with AWS, but I would highly recommend using Terraform because it's cloud agnostic. It's more widely used. Um, so ISE, and then also learn about CI/CD. You can use free tools like GitHub Actions, because GitHub is also going to be where you'll host your project. So it makes sense. But learn about the DevOps practices that you'll be using once you're in the job, and can showcase that, oh, I have built this complete end-to-end project that utilizes the not only the cloud services but also the some of the practices that makes it efficient. So that is kind of the roadmap, but I do have a resource if you want. It's called Learn to Cloud. This All of this is kind of covered there, along with the projects that you should build. And yeah, it's free. Just go to learntocloud.guide, and it is divided into different phases.
Amazing, amazing. You've laid out a really strong roadmap for learning cloud, and the actions that someone could take who is looking to go on that path. So if you're in the audience and that is you, don't take this lightly. Really follow those steps, and hopefully that will take you to your goal. And you mentioned learn to cloud. I even wanted to just ask you about that. What is the motivation behind, creating that sort of platform and guide, learn to cloud, and you know, giving that out to people?
Good question. I think for me and Gwen, so Gwen is my great friend. She works at Microsoft. Um, and we have known each other for a few years now, and
Mm,
I think we were just talking, and then she posted a tweet about it. We ended up talking about it, and then we were like, okay, just let's create the GitHub and push it out. So earlier it was just a markdown file. The reason why we came to that and sharing it with the public is both of us were kind of doing some kind of content. Both of us went through this self-taught, route of entering cloud as an industry, and both of us had since gone through that path, knew what were the struggles,
mm,
where were the gaps, what are some of the things that we wished we had when we were upskilling. And yeah, so just from like firsthand experience, I guess we were like, oh, these are the things that are missing, we need to have something. And that led to what Learn to Cloud is today, I guess.
amazing, amazing. And for the audience, that's a free resource to help you guys learn cloud. So check that out. The link for that will be in the description, and hopefully that can be really helpful in your journey of learning cloud computing. Now, I want to move on to probably my favorite section of the podcast. It's really fun. So what we do is we get our guest to tell an interesting career story, and it could be interesting in a good way or it could be interesting in a bad way. And
Oh,
so
okay.
we've had people tell stories about how, they made a mistake and something crashed or there was some sort of outage. Some people have told great stories about how, they've had this, great experience on their journey as an engineer or as someone in tech. And other people have just told some really random stuff, to be fair. So, what is the story, your career story, that you want to share with the audience today?
Whew. Um, yeah, I'm thinking between like a really bad story or should I tell a good one?
If you have
Let's
two, we'll take two. We'll take two stories. You could say both.
um okay. I'll go with the bad one first because, you know, it now that I look back at it, it's funny.
Mm,
Yeah, so during my cloud engineering, like this was I think this was within the first year or like towards the end of the first year of my cloud engineer role, and I was supposed to be like cleaning up something within our database, and was also doing some data gathering for both our finance team and for our operations team. So while I was doing that, I'm running SQL queries and getting the data out to like different reports within Excel, and sending that out. And because I was so at like practice, like done this before a lot of times, like this was a monthly thing. And when it came to data cleaning, so data cleaning requests came from like support team, so which was I part of earlier. So I'm like, oh, I'm going through these data cleaning requests, and usually every time I would run a select statement with my conditions
mm,
before I run the delete statement. So basically, if you are familiar with SQL queries, you know what I'm talking about. So instead of doing like delete from whatever table, and then I would have my where clause clauses, multiple of them, to do the actual filtering of which records should be deleted. Before I run that, I would do like select so that I can see the records.
Yeah.
Only this time, I'm like, I know my where clauses, like they look fine, the filtering looks fine. I go ahead and do the delete straight away. Um, and then you get an output saying these many rows are deleted. When I looked at the count of rows, I'm like, oh, this seems to be a lot more than how much it should have been. And oh man, I messed up. Now I can't run select too because all of those rows have been deleted to like
Yeah.
check what the actual rows and stuff. You can go back and like you know to see the transactions and stuff, but at this time I had to like bring in my colleague, and I'm like, hey, he was very like he was senior to me, and I'm like, hey, I did this. He was like kind of the database expert on our team, even though he was a cloud engineer. He's like, oh, okay. So we had to like stay not only the Friday evening, but this was on like a Thursday thing. So we not only stayed for a Friday evening, but we also spent Saturday, the
Wow.
weekend, to recover the database from the backups. And yeah, that taught me a lot. And he's like, why did you run select, like the delete statement, before running a select? He's like, I have been here for 6 years and he still runs his select statements first. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Yeah, I just got too confident. I don't know. Um, but yeah, lesson learned. It was a, yeah, it was good long 3 days. Because, yeah, because database backups were, stored in like archival, like
Right.
S3 buckets, and you had to pull it down. And it was like terabytes of data
Oh,
and
right.
then recover from them. So it was a. The other thing is you don't encounter something like this every day, or
Mm,
even like in years. So it was good practice to for me to learn like how do we recover from our backups.
that's really interesting. So the backups took that long, 3 days to recover.
Um, Not really. So we because this was a production system,
Right.
we had I know they were called like how you have a copy of the second like a secondary copy of database running
Right.
that you can um
Oh, like a replica.
yeah, like a replica that you can send traffic to when things like this happen.
Mm,
So we did that because customers were experiencing issues. They're like, oh, where is our data? um and that's what we did, and then stopped every connection to this prime, like the main database,
right.
and kind of looked through things. um so he was doing all the investigation, like he found the query that I ran, and like then he's like, oh, the only option is to recover from the database. The thing is, yeah, it was just because it was Thursday evening or like afternoon. We were paid for like extra hours and on call stuff, and since it was like my fault, like we didn't want to like push on call on this,
Mm,
because we had the replica running. So we came in on Friday, download the backups, and then Saturday is when we took the database offline. Like we took them offline and then restored from them.
right. 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 Makes so much sense.
Hmm.
Wow. I mean, we all, every engineer has one of those experiences, at least one. So it's really cool to hear. And you have a good story that you'd want to tell as well?
Good. I think um I've spent, I think, 2.5 years being on call,
Mm,
when I was a cloud engineer, and then later as a DevOps engineer. Um, and I remember how stressful the first like 2 to 3 months were, because you would get an alert at 3 a.m. and I had zero clue what I had to do.
Mm.
Because I would start. I would SSH into the servers, start looking at log files, look at wiki, and see what we have as a procedure when this happens and that happens, and then still it would stress me out because I'm like, oh, the system is one of the customers is down. How do we figure it out? Because everyone else is sleeping. Um, yeah, but I remember there was this one alert, probably after 3 or 4 months being on call, and I knew exactly what to do. Um, looking at looking at the log files on the server, um, but the high that it brought me, it was all like me sitting in the dark, um, with like a hoodie on and looking at a terminal, and then kind of trying to figure out that this production system is down and you have to bring it up. And I was able to bring it up. So the high you get from that is
Mm.
it's really cool. It's really cool.
Wow. And yeah, I I feel you on that. There's just certain times where you solve something and it just feels good.
Yes.
It feels good. Rishab, thanks so much for sharing those stories, and thank you for being on this episode of Tech Certified Podcast. Before we end off, I just want to give you the opportunity to just shout out anyone or anything, or just let the audience know where they can find you, and that sort of thing. So,
Sure. No, man. Shout out to you. Shout out to you. I
thanks,
see
man.
all the content that you're building, and the podcasts are amazing. I've listened to a few of them in the past. The few episodes that have been out. You're doing amazing work when it comes to just telling the community like, oh, these resources exist. This is how
Mm,
you do things, and I think that is necessary for us to be not only pushing out this content, but also being responsible, that it's genuine, it's transparent, there's no fluff around it. So
mm.
I yeah, shout out to you, man.
Thanks so much,
And
man.
yeah, if people want to find me on socials, they can, at Rishab in Cloud. um I'm on You can find me on LinkedIn, X, Twitter, and then also on YouTube.
Amazing, amazing. And we'll link all of that in the description, so the audience can easily find you on this page. Rishab, it's been amazing. Thanks so much for joining me on this episode. And for the audience, I'll see you next week.
Thank you for having me.